In the early hours of December 11, 2022, a fight broke out at a family-owned bar in Chicago during a woman's 25th birthday. Most bar fights follow a predictable script. There's an argument, some pushing, maybe a punch thrown, and then either someone gets thrown out or the whole group gets separated and sent home. They're so commonplace that it's almost expected at any bar that a fight can break out at any second. But some fights are a lot worse than others, and those are the ones that tend to make the news. As the man at the center of the fight was told to leave the bar, he decided to escalate things rapidly, and by the end of the night had systematically shot 4 people at alarmingly close range. The Vera Lounge at 3235 North Central Avenue, Chicago, was a family business. Carlos Vera owned the bar, and his brother, 50-year-old Ricky Vera, worked alongside him. The lounge served Latin cuisine and hosted Latin music nights and had only been open since October 2021. On the night of December 10th into the early hours of December 11th, the family was there for a birthday party for Ricky's daughter, Mariah Vera, who was turning 25. Mariah had worked alongside her father for years at a Belmont Cragen heating and cooling distributor, and the people who knew Ricky described him as the kind of man who would give you the shirt off his back, an independent contractor who fixed roofs, a grandfather, a father, and a brother. 24-year-old Mercedes Tavares of Chicago Heights was Ricky's niece and one of Mariah's close friends. She had 3 young children at home, a 3.5-year-old and 9-month-old twins. The father of her children, Miguel Gordillo, described her afterward as someone who absolutely adored their babies and made the family the center of her life, and who had been especially excited about the holidays. 26-year-old family friend Mario Pozuelos was also there. He was a family friend who had known the Veras for years, and his brother described him later as a beloved son, brother, nephew, and cousin who had been getting his life together. All of them were at Vera Lounge that night to celebrate Mariah turning 25. They had no idea who Samuel Parsons Salas was before that evening. 32-year-old Samuel Parsons Salas arrived at the party with his girlfriend of 2 weeks. He was not family, was not a close friend of the Veras, but had been brought along that night through a mutual connection. Mercedes Tavares had come with a friend, and that friend's new boyfriend happened to be Parsons Salas. They had come together with Tavares. At around 2:20 in the morning, as the party wound down, a physical altercation broke out inside the bar. Someone hit Mariah Vera during the argument. The details of what sparked it were not spelled out fully in court, but the result was that Parsons Salas was asked to leave. He left the building, but instead of walking away, he went to a car parked outside, retrieved a gun, and came back. What happened next was captured entirely on surveillance video. Ricky Vera had followed his daughter's attacker outside and was standing in the middle of School Street demanding to know who had hit his daughter. Parsons Salas' girlfriend tried to step between the two men. Parsons Salas fired past her and shot Ricky Vera in the head and chest. Ricky dropped in the street, then Parsons Salas turned and shot Mario Pozuelos, who was standing nearby, in the head and throat. Pozuelos collapsed on a curb. At this point, Mariah Vera rushed to her father, dropped to her knees beside him, and tried to tend to his wounds. The crowd around her was screaming and scattering. Parsons Salas walked over to her and shot her in the head at close range while she was on her knees beside her dying father. Then he walked over to Pozuelos, who was lying on the ground, shot and dying, and shot him again in the head at close range. Then he spotted Mercedes Tavares, who had been hiding behind a white van parked nearby. He approached her and shot her at close range. As she lay on the sidewalk, he stood over her and shot her again. Detectives later recovered 10 shell casings from the scene. Parsons Salas, according to prosecutors, admitted afterward that he had shot everyone who called out his name during the confrontation. He also specifically apologized for shooting Tavares, the woman he'd arrived at the party with. After the shooting, Parsons Salas ran to his girlfriend's SUV and got in the passenger seat. He pointed the gun at her head and told her to drive. She tried to crash the car deliberately in an attempt to escape, but it didn't work. Instead, he told her to keep driving, then took her coat and destroyed her cell phone. He forced her to drive him to a second-floor apartment in the 5200 block of West Montrose Avenue and held her there, threatening to shoot her if she screamed or tried to call for help. She remained there until investigators tracked Parsons Salas down on the following afternoon, using records from the Illinois Department of Corrections, which still had him on file from his supervised release. A SWAT team surrounded the apartment. Parsons Salas tried to run when officers closed in, but was apprehended a short distance away. Ricky Vera and Mario Pozuelos had been pronounced dead at the scene. Mercedes Tavares was pronounced dead at Mount Sinai Hospital. Mariah Vera, who had been shot in the head while kneeling beside her father, was taken to Advocate Illinois Masonic Medical Center in critical condition with bone fragments in her brain. She was fighting for her life. What made this story more than a single night of violence was what investigators found when they ran Samuel Parsons Salas through the system. In September 2009, he'd been part of an armed home invasion at an apartment in the 3,500 block of West Sunnyside Avenue in Chicago's Albany Park neighborhood. Inside that apartment were Angelina Escobar and her fiancé, Alex Santiago. Both were shot and killed during the robbery. Parsons Salas was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. His accomplice, Christopher Doring, was convicted of the killings and sentenced to life in prison. Parsons Salas's murder charges were dropped through a plea deal, and he pleaded guilty to 2 counts of armed home invasion, receiving an 8-year sentence. After credit for time served, he was released on mandatory supervised release in September 2022. Between the 2009 home invasion and the Vera Lounge shooting, he'd also been convicted of robbery and aggravated battery of a police officer, adding more felony convictions to a record that by December 2022 ran to multiple prison stints. 3 months after walking out of prison for the last time, he killed 3 people at a birthday party. Diane Loletta, the mother of Angelina Escobar, told CBS 2 from a Zoom call made from Los Angeles just after throat surgery that she had been informed of his release and knew it was just a matter of time. She said Illinois should be ashamed because 3 more people were dead because of that creature and it didn't have to happen. She noted that while Doring was the one who pulled the trigger in 2009, Parsons Salas had enabled the whole thing by driving them there, and that the system had rewarded him for it with 8 years and a release. The Cook County State's Attorney's Office said it had no comment on the 2009 plea agreement. No one could explain why a man whose accomplice received life in prison walked out after 8 years and was free to carry a gun to a birthday party. Samuel Parsons Salas was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted first-degree murder, and 1 count of kidnapping. He was ordered held without bail by Judge Susana Ortiz, who said he posed a serious threat to the community. Chicago Police Superintendent David Brown said at a press conference that he didn't want to go into too much detail on the horrific way those people were killed, but called it heartless. He said he wanted the court to throw away the key and get Parsons Salas off the streets permanently. The city issued a summary closure of Vera Lounge the same week, shutting it down indefinitely as a public safety matter. Carlos Vera, who owned the bar and had just lost his brother, had 3 days to request a hearing to challenge the closure. The case moved through the Cook County court system, with Parsons Salas held without bond throughout. As of the time of this video, the trial is still pending and a final verdict and sentence have not been publicly announced. But the surveillance footage, the 10 shell casings, the eyewitness accounts, and Parsons Salas's own admissions to investigators left very little for a jury to dispute. If convicted, Parsons Salas faces life without the possibility of parole.